Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Board of Education and Business Committee meeting of February 22nd, 2025. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place in the lands of the Hul'qumi'num speaking people, specifically the Quamaston Village. The Board of Education is honored to be able to collaboratively walk beside the Quw'utsun, Malahats, Assat, Nelakuts, Tamanos, and Leakson peoples who have cared for this land for thousands of years. May we walk gently on the ceded and unceded territories of their lands as we work together to lift up all of the Ha'asmana. Adoption of the agenda, please. Trustee Schmidt, Trustee Lise, all in favor? Motion carried. Minutes of the January 28th, 2025 Board of Education and Business Committee meeting. The Board of Education adopt the minutes of the January 28th meeting. All in favor? Trustee Croft, Trustee Lise, all in favor? And school plans. Welcome, Alexander Elementary.
Claire, there's a slight adjustment on there. Zachary George wasn't able to attend, and Wesley Rice Modest has come instead. Great, thank you. Aitzquell, Antha, and Kissinger, and I am the incredibly proud principal of Alexander Elementary.
And Antha Brenda Lee, and I am the incredibly proud vice principal at Alexander Elementary, as well as the grade 2-3 teacher.
Awesome. Alexander is located on the unceded traditional tumuk of the Quw'utsun Westimo. Alexander is the local school for 303 SMNM across 15 divisions. 70% of our SMNM have Indigenous ancestry, and 12% of SMNM have recently moved to Canada. We actually had a whole new family arrive with us yesterday. At Alexander, we pride ourselves on being part of a wolf pack. Positive, accepting, cooperative, and kind. But at Alexander, we are also learners. We are full of wonder, we are organized, we are leaders, and we are focused. At Alexander, our learners are also connected. Compared to the 49% district average, 78% of our grade 4 SMNM said they always feel welcome at Alexander. And that gives us a huge sense of pride. While we have many, many strengths, we also recognize that we do have some stretches as well. This year at Alexander, we have focused on 3 main goals. That's literacy, social emotional learning, and Indigenous knowledge and perspectives.
Our first special goal is a focus on literacy. In these pictures, you will see many of our beautiful SMNM participating in Tier 2 literacy instruction that happens across all 15 divisions in our school 4 times a week. And what button were you pressing?
I'm pressing this one.
Ooh,
I got carried away by staring at the beautiful pictures.
To address some of the stretches we're seeing at Alexander in the areas of literacy, we have been intentional in creating instructional structures that provide focused interventions. We have created timetables that have protected literacy time. So across the board, whether it be our morning primary literacy lessons or our afternoon intermediate lessons, that time is protected. We don't allow visitors, we don't do planning of other activities during that time. Is protected for literacy. And we're thrilled that this year, all 15 divisions are participating in those literacy interventions, where we take our kiddos, we reorganize them into groups where we're really going to be able to target their needs and send them off to other teachers for a little bit and then bring them back into our classrooms. We have created these beautiful book baskets. There are 15 of them. They rotate throughout the classrooms every month, and they have a focus on Indigenous authors and themes as another way of helping kiddos to feel a sense of belonging to who they are and their culture, as well as seeing themselves as literate readers. We have targeted resource dollars for additional Lexia licenses. Lexia is a Tier 3 intervention for literacy, and we've doubled the licenses that we are able to have as a targeted focus. And then we work alongside our district literacy coordinators to look at our district dashboards and then respond to it in ways that will move the dial for kiddos. Through the intentional literacy work at Alexander, students are starting to see themselves as readers, which is really, really important. And although many students are still working hard to become proficient readers, we are seeing growth as outlined in this table up on the screen of grade 3 learners across grade 3 classrooms. So if I want you to take a peek right here at these two sections. If you can't see them from where you are, this is our oral reading fluency scores in the fall, and then the oral reading fluency scores in the winter. This one kiddo, 4 up from the bottom, in the fall was able to read 0 words per minute. 0. And so while they're still in the red, they're not quite where we want them to be yet. In the winter, they're able to read 28 words a minute. And that is incredible growth for our kiddos by targeting them with these interventions. And then the other piece that I wanted to say is that this is one piece of the data. We also have the stories of our learners that we know. So in my grade 2-3 classroom, a couple of weeks ago, we were doing our morning lesson, and one of the kiddos, his face just lit up, and he went, I just read that. Like, I'm a reader. Do you see that? I just read it. And I think that when you get to see that excitement and having kids feel that power in themselves as they're becoming readers, it's pretty incredible.
The second area that we are focused on at Alexander is social emotional learning. You'll see a number of beautiful pictures. We have our 6 very proud SMNM who represented us at Gravity Cars. We have our grade 6-7s that feel that they annihilated the Cowichan Capitals during a basketball game. Kathy may tell a different story, I'm not sure.
I agree completely.
We have our beautiful friend in the middle who goes around every Thursday and serves teachers tea and makes sure that they're okay. And then we have our kiddos over here who were helping me to plant 400 daffodil bulbs to come up in the spring. So just a variety of different ways that we are feeling connected and giving back to our school as well. So looking at social emotional learning, while we have that lovely number of 78% of our grade 4 students feeling really connected, this number, we know, begins to decrease as students move towards grade 7. So to address some of these social emotional needs that we're seeing at school, we are continuously looking for opportunities for student leadership and for student voice. We have a mental health committee, and our PLC learning is focused on social emotional learning. We are reviewing data frequently, such as our red, yellow, green, or indicators of success, and we are looking at our learners and at which grade levels might require more supports or different supports. And finally, this year, some of our staff members were also awarded a collaboration grant to look at schools' transitions to better support Alexander students as they move on to their next school. Another way that we embed social emotional learning is through our morning NATIF announcements. And I know last year our kiddos presented their NATIF announcements to you all, but this is a beautiful way that we start our day every morning with the calming rhythm of a student drum, and we welcome the day in a good way. Each day of the week has a mental health focus, and we share practical ideas to help learners incorporate their teachings. This is not an average day, this is Halloween. Our kids don't always dress like that.
Our third vessel goal is to increase our intentional recognition of the First Peoples principles of learning and Indigenous knowledge and worldviews. We continue with this goal as an act of understanding truth and working towards reconciliation. Some of the beautiful ways that we're privileged to do this work are to include land-based days. The most adorable is seeing our 2 kindergarten classrooms head off in our Nunsum Shussum walks, which happen once a month to go out on land-based days. We have Hulkaminam culture and language classes happening 3 times a week for every single class. I can't tell you the amount of language I have learned in the past 5 months alone, and learning constantly from the kiddos as well who've had that experience daily. We give back to the community and honor our elders. We have some beautiful pictures that were just sent back from some elders who had received Valentine's cards and how their hearts were warmed by that, which was beautiful. And we also focus on traditional food storage and harvesting and some of those land-based days. So they were doing some salmon canning, and I know that there's lots of talk about a possibility of a smokehouse joining us. That's something.
Yep. So part of our focus on Indigenous perspectives is also we have a weekly drumming and dance practice. So each week, 30 to 40 students attend our Tuesday lunchtime practices. And we were privileged recently enough to be invited to the new Song and a Gathering space at Clutson Secondary, where our students were dancing. This is their future school and the place where all of these learners will graduate from. Witnessing these learners drumming and dancing weekly brings a huge sense of pride and celebrates who many of these learners are. Last year, these dancers were asked to be part of the first Salmon Festival. They danced at our open house, which was the picture prior to, and they danced in front of our entire school and over 100 family members. Last spring, they also visited several of our district's elementary schools to share their passion about drumming and dancing. At this time, I'd like to welcome up 5 amazing SMNM to speak to their experiences and what drumming and dancing means to them. These students spent time with me last week writing down some of their words. They are incredibly brave and they are leaders each and every day at Alexander. Morning, Maverick.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the Maverick, I have been dancing for 6 years and drumming for 2. Dancing makes me feel proud of my accomplishments and who I am. I am also proud of what I do for kids when I am a leader.
At the Wesley, I have been dancing since I have been in kindergarten. Dancing makes me feel alive. I feel like I am more than just a student. I am connected to my culture, and I am happy on the inside and out.
And Stephanie, I have been dancing for 5 years. Dancing makes me feel connected to my culture. School is sometimes hard for me, but on the days I get to dance, it helps me when I'm sad to calm down. I am proud to be a leader and to show younger students how to be respectful and to be ready to dance. And I have been dancing at the foot of the line for 2 years. I have been also in line for my sisters. When I dance, I step up on my toes. I am faithful, I am a leader. And for Cassie, dancing is an amazing experience. If I am having a hard day, it helps me to think and to calm my mind down. Dancing is also a gift, and it helps me learn about Indigenous culture, and I'm very thankful to have this opportunity to learn about this amazing culture.
Okay. Beautiful. We have a video that we took last week. It's just a rough video, and these guys will probably groan on the inside for seeing themselves dancing. But as Bella said, she has been leading the line for the last 2 years. She steps up. She is such a leader, and she is so beautiful in her dance. So it's a little bit rough, but we just wanted to share so you guys could have a little bit of an idea of the kiddos in their dancing. The video ends and you'll see another student who has joined in the drumming. She began her drumming actually with the native announcements in the morning, but this is also Robert and Pam, and they come with us each Tuesday and are sharing their gift and knowledge of dance with the SMNM at Alexander. So thank you very much, everybody.
Any questions? Comments?
More of a statement. Cassie, you said that dancing was a gift, but I want to let you all know that you are all gifts to us. In being in our room today in front of a whole bunch of adults that you don't know, telling us how much you love about dance and what it does for you, whether it's culturally or spiritually, whatever that connection is, that just shows us how brave you guys are, but how incredibly gifted you are. So thank you for being here today. And then, of course, to the adults that presented, thank you for being so honest with your stretches and your strengths and where your kiddos are going and how they're getting there. And it's always just a pleasure to hear about the wolf pack, and it's also a pleasure to be in your space and enjoying your company and watching your kiddos, your school. I find every time I walk in, and I said it at another school this morning, it just feels like a hug. The energy is always so uplifting when I come into Alexander, and so I just want to thank you both for presenting today, but especially to your brave students for coming in and sharing their gift of dance with us. So thank you.
Trustee Lisa.
I know that your school has had quite a challenge put upon you since New Year's, and I would also just like to acknowledge how strong and brave and resilient you are to be able to adapt to the changes and the challenges that were put in front of you. And I hope that everybody is thriving and finding their way.
I think dance is helping her.
Yeah.
Trustee Croft.
I have a question for any or all of the dancers who would care to share. And I was wondering if you could think a little bit about the future, because you've all been doing it for quite a while, so you must have changed and learned and grown. So I'm wondering if you sort of foresee a bit of a future or a next step or a next something that you want to enjoy or learn about dance.
Ever since before I started dancing, I was always overwhelmed. And then when I first started dancing, everything just started to go back to normal.
Nice, thank you. Any other thoughts about what's on the horizon?
Before I started dancing, I used to be in like a lot of pain. Like I would be really sad and emotional and stuff, and I would get in a lot of drama and a lot of fights with people. But once I started dancing, like that stuff just kind of went away. So it helped that.
These are really important things to learn about yourself. A lot of us don't get there until many decades later. Any other thoughts?
Since I started dancing before, I'll be having lots of bad days and stuff until I started dancing. Then all my emotions will just be gone.
Any thoughts about why that is?
I guess I'll just dance them away.
Dance them away.
Very
My heart.
And how does that help your schoolwork?
I've been doing lots of schoolwork since. Like I've been more attached. Like I've been getting more work done since.
Do you really enjoy your school? Well, that's a testament to your principals and all your teachers. So you should thank them. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming. This is one of our favorite times of the month when schools show up and tell us about what's going on. So thank you for coming. Next up, we have Bench Elementary, Principal Kyla Bridge.
Well, and thank you for having us. I'm Quinna at the Kyla Bridge, and this is Stephen Brooks. We are very excited to present to you today. Cheat sheet here. I too am also very proud And I want to thank you for going first, Anne and Brenda, and to the students. I know one of your students has just stepped out, but I see lots of amazing things, and I think you look like your older students because you're quite tall. You're probably amazing leaders for the younger students in your school, and I really sense that you have a really strong sense of identity. Those are those feelings that you're probably feeling, and good for you. That's what's going to carry you through to be stewards into the future, so well done. To talk about Bench Elementary, very excited, thank you. We have lots of parents, we have students, and we have teachers here. I'll introduce everyone momentarily. A little bit of background, we are the second largest elementary school in the district. We have approximately 420 students from grades K to 7. We have 19 divisions, and we live in, our school is located in rural Cowichan Bay, as many of you know. I sent out an email to the teachers because we have lots of teachers on staff that have been there for a very long time. Many of them went to school there, many of them did their practicums there, and many of them are teaching. This is the only school that they've been teaching at. So I wanted to do a little bit of an experiment. So I asked them how many years of service they have given to teaching. So out of the 26 teachers, their total years of service added up to 419 years. I don't know, I thought it was just interesting to see how many years of service that they've been offering to students. And of those years, of the teachers there, approximately 200 years they've been at Bench Elementary. That's a long time. So there's lots of experience in our building, and sometimes it's more about us stepping out of their way so that they can do the job that they know how to do. And in saying that, I'll come back to you guys in a second. But we have we have 3 specific goals that we've been working on for our framework for enhancing student learning. One of the goals is social emotional learning and maintaining good mental health and well-being for our students. Our second is incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing into our practice and our being, working with the students. And our third is obviously a student achievement goal, specifically literacy and numeracy. So we've made, much like Alexander, we have some protected banded learning time, which we're very excited about. This is new for us. And we've noticed we have the primary and intermediate, as Anne and Brenda referenced. And this is protected time where students are entirely engaged in literacy, using really good quality targeted instruction to improve phonics, fluency, comprehension, and literacy skills in general. And we've noticed considerable change and confidence and ability, both with teachers and students, and it's been a real community building event. Students are working with teachers who may not necessarily be their classroom teacher, so it has a very community feel, and the collaboration in the building is such that it has that energy that we talked about when I walked in this morning. It's that excitement. It doesn't feel stale or flat. It feels beautiful and elevated, and kids are excited to go and see different people and learn. I have a daughter in grade 4, so she's a part of the program, so I feel personally invested, and the stakes are pretty high because my own daughter is involved in this program, and it's very exciting. And Steve runs numbers
for us. Steve likes to look at data, and we look at data frequently. And between the fall and winter data, we've noted 15. I always get this wrong. Please jump in. 15th percentile jump in our literacy rates, which I think is outstanding. And maintaining the energy and enthusiasm through to the end of the year is going to be the next stretch that we're about to do. But the kids, I walked into a 2-3 class today who they asked me to say hello to all of you. They wanted to know why I was so dressed up and where I was going today. So I said I had to come and present to you today. And they said, well, what do those trustees do? I said, well, they make sure that I do my job and that you're all learning and improving. And oh, well, you can tell them that we're reading chapter books. And say hi for us. So that's fantastic. So the sense of pride is really uplifting. We are dabbling in numeracy and working towards our numeracy goals. We are setting the stage and preparing for next year, so this will be a focus moving into next year. But most importantly, for some of you, I am a new administrator to bench. I'm a new principal to bench, but I'm not a new administrator. And I know that everything I have to say probably is not nearly as important as the people that I brought with me today. So this is the exciting part. We are part of the Climate Action Grant, and we have, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but Miss Tan and Miss Geniak are the two teachers who are really leading the learning around the climate action change, and they've beautifully woven together all of our three. The reason I asked them is because they've woven together all 3 of our school goals, and they've really married together the competencies, they've married together the learning, and they've created a project that I think is just so magical and amazing that connects everyone together. So they're going to speak today specifically about the work that they've been doing. And I just wanted to emphasize, sometimes we get hung up with structures, systems, numbers, statistics, and I can sit and talk until I'm blue in the face, but the actual work and the hard work are what these kids are up to. So this is what I'm very, very proud about. So I'm very excited. I'm going to let the teachers introduce themselves and the teachers introduce the kids, and I'm going to get out of the way so that they can show you all the hard work that they have been doing so far this year. Come on up, Rich. All right. So I'm Vanessa Tan. I'm Sherry Geniak.
We have brought with us a bunch of kids today, and they've got some stuff that we're going to be showing and talking about. I'd like to introduce to you grade 1 students, Lily Aldcroft and Harlow Latham. And Ms. Geniak, would you like to introduce?
This is Mackenzie Ralph and Ethan Huntley and Olivia Frew. They're in my class.
And our 2 classes work together. It's kind of like a big buddy, little buddy situation, but we take it to the next level. So the identity of our buddy program is called Blue Crew, and this is the 2nd year that we've been working Ms. Geniak and I have been working together to really promote and build in ocean literacy competencies into our students and their learning across the curriculum, with the purpose of really inspiring students to get to know each other across the grades, and to build capacity between our primary learners and our intermediate learners through those relationships. And we're going to just change slides. Yeah.
Okay.
And Ms. Geniak will tell you where our learning takes place.
So we are so grateful to share our learning, which takes place on the territory of Chehalis, which is Cowichan Bay. And before we get started, we got started because this book brought us together. We didn't know each other for a while. And I think one of the catalysts to collaboration is really finding your people and finding your passion through that. So Vanessa and I met online. I was doing this workshop through UC Davis. It was a CDOC Society thing, exploring the Salish Sea, where we were gifted textbooks that just beautiful, stunning. Vanessa was one of the presenters, and then did that for a while, kind of forgot about it. And then I did a workshop on tapestry, and Vanessa showed up, and I'm like, wow, we keep running into each other. Then I found out she works in our district, and I'm like, what? No way.
Before I even moved to the school district.
Yeah. And then somehow we ended up at Yum Yum Nuts together.
We did.
We were side by side on a blanket, and we both looked at each other and went, we're meeting in person at Yum Yum Nuts. How apropos. And then when she started teaching at Bench, I knew we had to do something around this book. And so we got to talking, and it didn't matter really what grade we were teaching, because really, when you look at the curricular competencies, you see the big ideas and you see a lot of overlap. And there are so many ways you can weave that in. And so we just like put our two heads together and just started, it was just simpatico. So,
it was. Yeah, we've been waiting for each other for a long time. And one of the things that I'm super, super passionate about is embedding this concept of ocean literacy into our work. And so finding Sherry was just a dream come true, because now we can bring our students together. And I'd like to share this little fact. Canada, a lot of people don't realize that Canada is as high as it is wide, and that we're an ocean nation. We're surrounded by oceans on all three sides, and we have the longest coastline in Canada. And so that leads to an opportunity for us to really develop ocean literacy across the curriculum. And there's this organization called Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition that is promoting the concept of a blue school. So we're in year 2 of earning a blue schools designation from Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition. And we're really grateful because we've also been blessed with some finances from the Cowichan School District. So thank you so much for putting together the Climate Action Grant opportunities for us, because it gives us a little bit of money for us to support some action projects for learners like these fine children here. We also like to bring together as many resources as we can to really build competency across the curriculum and to make learning really hands-on and engaged. And this part, we've got a picture that
I don't know what happened to our little triangles.
Imagine the core competency
Imagine the CT and the PS. When we talk about collaborating, these are really our collaborative skills. And this is what we're really looking at, connecting the kids through communication, thinking, personal and social responsibility through this environmental stewardship and community engagement, as well as looking at different ways when we get together for collaborating, working together, and enhancing those skills. So important.
And without further ado, we would like, there it is, to introduce you to our fine students over here who have more to tell you about our work that we do together at Bench.
I'm Squirrel, and thanks Zetka for having us. We're excited to share some of our learning at our school. We'll be telling you about the Bench, Blue Crew, and Nature Club, 2 groups that bring students together across grades to explore sustainability, Indigenous knowledge, and environmental stewardship.
As many of you know, Bench is over 150 years old, so legacy is very important for us. Last May, for the Bench Move-a-thon fundraiser, our whole school set the goal to run Vancouver Island from tip to tip as many times as possible.
We added up all of our kilometers, and by the end of the week, we ran up in Vancouver, up and down Vancouver Island 10 times, learning about the Indigenous communities and traditional territories we passed through along our way.
This year, Blue Crew is going to explore traditional knowledge all around Vancouver Island. Our journey begins on the west coast of Vancouver Island with a study of dentalium cells.
We're learning how these small white shells were an important trade item for indigenous nations across North America and how they connect to traditional ecological knowledge.
Using the design thinking cycle, we are working with our groups to design a tool to harvest dentalium shells.
Through this inquiry, we're exploring indigenous ways of knowing, especially a Hausit worldview of is to swap, which means everything is one. Earlier today, we Zoom call with grade 2 students from a Hausit. It was very fun to meet kids from a Hausit. That is close to the Pino. We learned what it is like to live on the west coast side of Vancouver Island. They take lots of boats to get everywhere.
Miss Tan and Miss Geniak want to inspire the whole bench learning community to become better stewards of our resources at school, especially paper. Every week, the Bench Nature Club meets at lunch.
In Nature Club, we help take care of the earth we're using paper more mindfully, and we upcycle it into something new. We have 2 projects on the go. Goose paper is good on one side, and we use it to make zines. Newspaper is used on both sides. And in the upcycling is some paper and pollinator patches.
So Lily is going to pass around our zine library, and Harlow is going to pass around. So maybe Harlow, do you want to pass around Lily going to go this side? Harlow will go this side. So you can take a look at some of our projects that we do. One of them is using our goose paper, which is good on one side. And we have some little more innovative paper management. So we've got our goose paper that's good on one side. Juice paper is used on both sides. We can upcycle that into new paper. And we've got our colored paper scraps down at the bottom. So take a look at some of the cool things that kids have been doing to be more mindful about their
We
paper.
do this during a nature club at lunch, and on average, we have 30-plus students crammed into this transportable, and we're making paper, we're making zines. It's just a fun, active place for kids to come in and just hang out for the lunch recess time on Wednesdays.
It also gives us the opportunity to offer this type of hands-on action learning to the entire school community, because Nature Club is open to K-7 students. And we do have students that come from all grades to participate, which is really fantastic. Okay. Let's just maybe. Oh yes. Right here, this is some of the recycled.
This is some of the recycled paper we've made so far. We used paper since last week. It was really fun.
Both Blue Crew and Nature Club are more than just learning in classrooms. We take action. Our work helps us connect with Indigenous knowledge, reduce waste, and protect our environment. We're also working towards earning our Blue Schools designation from the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition. We are excited to share what we've learned with others.
We're looking forward to exploring more action projects in Blue Crew and Nature Club this year to make more connections to the island we call home.
We want to thank you for supporting projects like these at Bench Elementary. Our learning is hands-on, meaningful, and connects us to the land and community. We hope you'll think about that everything is connected, just like we do in our learning.
Haitsavaka for coming.
Questions? Questions, anybody?
Let's give these wonderful kids a round of applause.
Questions?
Well, first of all, how exciting, because the board has really tackled climate action this year, and it was a big honor for the board last year to add the the first time we've ever put out the money to be able to do these projects, and we're excited about listening to the projects that are coming in from this year's climate action money. So thank you for showing us everything that you guys are doing, and to the students, excitement. You know, it's always wonderful for us adults to be able to see our future and to see how passionate you are about it. Instead of just talking about it, you truly made me believe, and you little ones are, wow, adorable. But thank you for being so brave to be here today, and to Big Buddies for supporting the little ones while they're doing their reading. The community is really quite beautiful, and so thank you for coming today, and thank you for being so brave and supporting, you know, the ones younger than you, and to the teachers, thank you for guiding this project.
Our pleasure.
Trustee Croft.
So I have a question for the kids, whoever's willing to give this a shot. So I have two questions for you. First of all, what was the most surprising thing that you learned when you went up and down the island? And what is the happiest story you learned from that same journey?
Well, surprising thing that I've learned was when we were going up and down, how long the island seems to be, and how many times we could do it together as a school. I was surprised that it didn't take us, like, I thought it would take us forever, but it didn't take us very long.
I think we were surprised to know how many times. Yeah, that was, sorry, I interrupted you. Very cool.
And happiest moments? Finishing.
For me, I say, like, one of the happiest moments when we were running our legacy trail was, like, seeing how much progress we had made at the right next to the office. We had the board, and that's where it was. And every time we made it across, one time I went to the office and I looked, and inside I kind of just did a little jump for joy.
I also liked the competition that we could put into it in our classes. That was fun. Could see who could do the most laps around the legacy trail and get the furthest.
There was
class.
also this thing where other classes would challenge classes to
fun.
see who could run the most laps.
Okay, cool. So who ran the most laps?
It was
Yeah.
Was it your class? Was it my class?
No.
Oh, Miss Keel.
Miss Keel's class.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mrs. Keel.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
I really would like to thank you all for coming today. I don't have any questions. This is probably our favorite time of the month when classes show up, and I really appreciate you coming, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good job. I think us kids, I think we should put out a challenge to the adults to try and practice the goose method. I don't know what the color method is. That hasn't been introduced at the assembly yet.
So that's when we're making like this colored paper. We collect the colored paper scraps. So when Valentine's Day came around, we ran around to all the recycling bins and harvested all the different scraps that would have just gone to the great wide yonder. And we've upcycled them into this beautiful seed paper.
So goose paper, good on both sides.
Good on one side.
Good on one side, and juice paper. How would they incorporate that into their?
So that's so the juice paper is what we use to shred and make the new paper. So we're transforming it, giving it new life.
And I often see Miss Tam late on a Friday collecting all of those clear bags with all of the recycled paper and I see her digging through, but I see you weighing those paper bags.
Yeah, so
what's the purpose of
the purpose of that is to keep track of how our school is reducing our paper consumption, because our goal as a school community, and that's really another part that Nature Club does, is to advocate to the whole school community about ways that we can be better paper stewards and ways that we can take responsibility for our waste. And part of that is by being mindful about how and why we're using paper to start with. And if it's a task that could be done on a piece of newspaper, go ahead and help yourself to that. And it's amazing to see how much waste we've reduced so far. I was watching the waste management company come in with their big truck the other day, and I was waiting for the dumpster to dump all the excess paper into it, and I couldn't believe it. We hardly had any paper in our dumpster this week, so
yeah,
way to go us.
That's pretty great.
And we're saving some money too, aren't we, Miss Bridge?
Paper
costs a lot of money.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Feel free to take your kiddos out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for bringing your kiddos. Their favorite part.
Thanks for waiting
I
through
can
that.
take it for you. We could actually.
Anne, thank you for bringing. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for having us.
Well, the fun's over.
Now we got to do revised administrative procedures, Mr. Superintendent.
Great, thank you. Through your chair, just refer to page 7, your report kit here. 2 administrative procedures that have been updated to let you know. AP 173, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Assistant Superintendent Rowan has been working on this. It has been revised and to reflect terminology has been updated to align with the BC government and the Government of Canada sites, as well as alignment to policy 25. So thank you for that work. As well, I'd like to bring to your attention AP 514, management of school-based grant-generated funds. And thank you to Secretary Treasurer Sanquist for this. It has also been revised, and this reflects requests for ongoing recognition of a donation, such as a plaque, were previously approved by the Board of Education, and they are now directed to the Associate Superintendent in charge of communications to be determined in alignment with AP 153, advertising, canvassing, and commercial solicitation. So again, thank you for this work and bring it to your attention.
Thank you. Business and operations, Mr. Sandquist.
Thank you. I am pleased to bring to the board, or to Board Education and Business Committee this evening, the 2024-2025 amended annual budget. This is a little bit late this year due to late announcement of the operating grant funding, which is calculated predominantly on the September enrollment. So there's a February count and a May count still coming, but they're quite small. And once the operating grant comes out, the minister gives the board 60 days to adopt the budget. So the bulk of the work on the 24-25 amended annual budget was completed last spring as our annual budget. And what this budget represents are changes that have occurred since that time. So there's a little bit of a tour here for interested parties to follow along. This budget was built on the previous strategic priorities. They were updated during this budget cycle, and so we're making note that As we move into the 25-26 budget, we will apply the 25-30 Beyond Education Strategic Plan. The budget is a consolidation of 3 funds: the capital fund, the operating fund, and the special purpose funds. And we use the prior year's amended annual budget for comparative purposes. So in looking at the 2 columns, you will see the current amended annual budget and last year's amended annual budget, and you'll be able to see what the changes are. So one of the reasons why the funding is down when you look at the comparison, predominantly related to a decrease of 149 FTE from the prior year. And that was 220 fewer than projection. So that was a bit of a surprise this year. And we'll talk a little bit later in my, my report on estimated enrollment for next year. But we certainly did not see this drop in enrollment coming this year. Now, we have made some adjustments to the budget that counter some of that loss. For instance, the tuition budget for the International Student Program is up a bit, but we are also down a little bit on investment income, as it was based on Bank of Canada lending rates, which have been dropping significantly in the last number of announcements from the Bank of Canada. On special purpose funds, there really aren't many differences. There is a new Ministry of Education and Child Care grant for work experience enhancements that's been added, but otherwise they are just sort of the regular business where you'll find Classroom Enhancement Fund, Community Link, Annual Facilities Grant, Feeding Futures, to name a few of the special purpose funds. And they're all detailed within the budget document. Now, this is the first year that, even though Quetson Secondary has been under construction for 3 years, this is the first year that we recognize what we consider to be the amortization or the depreciation on that building. As well, we recognize the revenue over the life expectancy of that building. So if the province granted $84 million for the project, it gets brought into income, that $84 million, over the lifespan of that building. So you get a portion. Let's just say it's going to last 50 years. 150 of it comes into revenue each year. And it's the same on the amortization, the expensing of the depreciation. The building's value or lifespan will go down over time. Comes into amortization 1/50th at that same rate. So this is the first year that that's come in. So you will see a lift on the deferred revenue recognition in this budget, as well as the amortization. It's complex to explain. I hope that was layperson's terms. Things that the board had done year over year, there was an additional $100,000 that's still here for improving Indigenous learner outcomes. The board had supported $75,000 for costs related to rebranding Cowichan Secondary to Quetson Secondary. I believe the majority of that has gone to school uniforms. The budget has an increase in dual credit tuition as well as enrollment. So there's an income and there's an expense that goes out. And one of the big things that was built into this budget when we did the annual budget were significant increases in WorkSafe BC, extended health, dental, and CPP premiums. So that was about a $1.5 million pressure. This budget also includes wage increases for 3%. And we had made an estimate of around $950,000 for the additional 1%. And we're extremely close on that estimate. So what we knew at the time of budgeting was there would be an increase of 2%. That was guaranteed in the collective agreements. It ended up being 3% due to inflation rates. And so we did a good job in estimating that. Not much change in the area of district administration. Most of that is just due to the wage increases of 3% that went through the system. And same really for operations and maintenance. Not much change, 3% for wages, but there's where I'm bringing in that 1.3% that results from the amortization or the depreciation of the building. That's an increase. And then again, transportation levels have been relatively similar. The budget has been balanced utilizing $4.5 million of surplus. Now that's not all unrestricted surplus. Some of those are items that are carrying over from the previous year. So there was funding granted, for instance, for the ICY program of $300,000 that gets spent this year. So we restrict that revenue. So there was about $1.6 to $1.7 million, $1.6 million that was restricted. It's like having an item on your credit card, but you don't have to pay the bill yet till the next month. So that's essentially what those restrictions are. So it really was balanced, utilizing about $2.9 million in unrestricted surplus. That leaves $3.9 million of the 2023-2024 surplus, which is 3.52% of operating budget. That is not including any additional surpluses that are anticipated for this year. That's a completely different topic. This is what was used for last year's budget based on what was already in the bank. Now that is close to the board's policy on contingency, which is to have 1 to 3%. So what's not in the budget that we also like to provide you with the schedule of are the number of FTE, so the number of teachers, special purpose, number of principals. So there is a bit of a drop here on teacher staffing from the original budget that was filed in the spring. That is a result of declining enrollment and not having all the divisions that were originally budgeted for. So you drop 149 students, you typically drop teachers along with that. So some of that was recovered in the elementary schools. And what's called the Classroom Enhancement Fund, which are the classroom size and composition teachers. Right now you can see on the report 71.85. And that was closer to 78 in the previous year. So that is determined based on the composition of the students that arrive at each school. But otherwise, relatively similar. So there's just a quick overview of the changes in the budget. We have some assorted schedules here where we talk about, give a little more description of why the grant has changed when we look at the operating budget. So you can follow along there. I don't know if I need to go through all of the revenues that much. I think everybody understands the 149 FTE enrollment drop is going to result in a drop in revenues. We do see here a slight reduction in principal vice principal salaries from the original budget, and that is a result of position being recoded to excluded. So if a person goes from a director to an assistant superintendent, they go from being a principal to being an exempt staff member. And so that was the reason for that change. Under teacher salaries, they are still up. We did talk to the board earlier about how the average teacher salary had increased year over year, and that was a little bit unexpected. So we felt that that was likely a result of fewer retirements, resulting in teachers with higher wages remaining in the employment of the board. And we did see some offsetting revenues for that as well. Education assistant salaries, pretty close. That's just really rolling over the extra hour fund, which is a bargain component, same as with clerical. Not much adjustments in USW salaries, and the big change on excluded was taking that principal position and moving it there, and also adding the child and youth counselors through the ICY program. So those are considered to be exempt employees and not teachers, those two individuals. And the bulk of that in service extracurricular, we haven't made any adjustments to absenteeism rates. Why that budget's gone up, or just some budgets that rolled over, that unpaid credit card bill I was talking about. Overall, a little bit down, $312,000 down on our benefits. We found some additional savings through the staff benefits. We had slightly overestimated there. So overall, we are now at 25.26% benefit rate on wages. And everything else is pretty much in line with the current budget, other than the year over year rollover items. One area that we have increased is insurance by $20,000, and that is 2 additional $10,000 deductibles. We have not had a good year, as you're aware. The Alexander fire, the Drinkwater gym flooded. There was a flood at Shemita's Secondary. And the list goes on, and the board are responsible for paying deductibles on those claims. So that means that overall the budget balance has gone up year over year on expenditures by 1.9 million, of which 1.6 I showed you was just rollover. The rest of that is really, I would say, mainly related to that average teacher salary adjustment. And then there's some other comparatives here, just comparing all of the different budgets for you. I'm not going to go into those in detail. I think the operating budget is the one that makes the most sense. And then we end up with the actual, looking at the surplus here. So the guided tour, this is where that 3.52% came from. Originally, the board ended the previous year-end with 3.95%, and that was adjusted down by 412,000 as that was the actual net impact. Now we can report to the board of the decline in enrollment after mitigating what could be mitigated to reduce that original enrollment drop, that original funding drop that at one time we were estimating closer to $1 million, the shortfall. So I think overall we came out of that unexpected enrollment drop in pretty good shape. And then we move into the actual budget bylaw. This is the form that the Ministry of Education and Childcare require us to submit. So this is the amended annual budget at June 30th, 2025. There's a lot of schedules here. I'm not going to go through them. But what we can say is this is a consolidated statement. When we're comparing the two budgets from year to year, we are looking at the capital, the operating, and the special purpose funds together. When it says there's a surplus or a deficit down here, that is simply the capital fund, and that is based on that difference between the revenues that are coming in on the funding that's come from the ministry over the 50 years and the expenditures going out on the amortization over the 50 years. It doesn't actually contribute to the board's bottom line. And you can see there the operating budget is $112,536,084, and there's also an additional $62,576 of assets purchased from the operating budget. So those would be anything that's over $5,000 that was previously allocated to a supply line item. And then you have your special purpose funds at $16,452,000, of which that purchased $625,000 additional capital assets purchased. That's the annual facility grant, purchasing capital, as well as there's a carryover on the AFG from a number of years ago that was utilized as well, I believe, on the bench project. I think it was a bench project. Yeah. And then capital fund. That's the reason the capital fund is so much larger than the previous year. The 6.2 versus the 4.9 is related again to that amortization concept that I'm trying to explain in simple terms, but it's probably the most complex part of the budget. So that forms the bylaw of $136,116,976, which becomes the recommended motion to move forward to the board meeting in March.
Any questions, Trustee Schmidt and then Trustee Croft?
Through the chair to Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Sandquist, I just want to say thank you because I know our two budgets ran into each other this year because of the delay in the funding announcement, and so I know that you and Carrie and Claudia have been working overtime to try and get us this amended budget, and as well as push forward on our 2025-2026 budget. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to you and your staff for managing to get this done and continue to push us forward on the next budget. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think I may have jumped ahead a little bit. I was going to say so moved to move it up to the next meeting.
I'll second that.
In favor? Motion carried.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, we have I think there may be, I'm not sure if we have a question?
Eduardo?
Oh, no, I was just putting my hand up to second, so all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Motion carried. That was easy.
You worked for 40 or 50 hours.
You made things easy for us.
Oh my goodness.
I have more.
Oh,
yeah. Well, you know, as our chair has indicated, these two cycles have overlapped in this year, and we have we've been preparing this, the amended budget. We've also been looking forward to the 25-26, and one of the requirements was to submit the enrollment by February the 15th. And Looking at the next year, a number of us have met. I've worked closely with Associate Superintendent Darlene Reynolds to look at the elementary enrollment, and very closely with the Associate Superintendent, with Margaret on the secondary. Margaret, I wasn't sure to see the last name or the first name. Olson, to look at the secondary enrollments. And really what we're seeing is some stabilization, and I'll show you here in a little bit, on the secondary enrollments and a decline in the elementary. We looked at the changes between September 30th and January 2025, January 30th, 31st. And we could see that we're already seeing a little bit of out-migration through some of the elementary schools. Not a lot, but there's one or two kind of through each of the elementary schools, which tells us there isn't that in-migration cycle happening. So we're kind of stable, relatively stable for the first half of the year. So then it really comes down to the kindergarten rates, with the birth rates and the number of kindergarten students that we're expecting. And so we are expecting another year close to the current year of around 500 Ks. Looking at the registrations that have come in to date, doing some reasonableness testing around them, looking at the Beauregard projections, we landed at about 500 Ks, and I'll show you what that looks like on the next part. But overall, that's a drop of about 136 students year over year. And then Beauregard starts to tell us that things should start to stabilize a little bit. Now we'll have to wait and see if that happens. We don't have a crystal ball to go out 2 years, 3 years. And going out 2 or 3 years is really for the ministry to have their projections for their planning. It certainly could change if things change, but we're hoping that we rebound on our in-migration figures for those 2 years. So if I move down to the actual enrollment, here's where you can see the growth that's happened sort of year over year up until 23-24. And then we see this drop this year from 8673 to 8501. And I know that's more than 149 because we also had drops in the February and May count, and the 149 figure refers to September over September. So we're thinking that that's going to drop a little bit to 8365 total for next year, and then 8372, 8360. So that's sort of a stabilization. So that is what we will be basing the initial budget calculations on, and that is what the ministry will be funding on. It's a drop of 136 FTE. And we'll be making the appropriate staffing adjustments before we bring the draft to the board, because there's ratios of how that works. So that's an information item. I don't know if there's any questions on enrollment. Oh, pretty. I don't see anybody else. Okay, so moving right along. What are the things that we're looking at as we start to prepare the 25-26 annual budget? I've prepared a preview document for the committee because there are some interesting things. So currently, as the board is planning for next year's budget, looking at setting priorities, that's just done through the strategic plan update, the 2025-2030 Beyond Education. We've done enrollment projections already. There's been significant amount of consultation with the partner groups. The survey has gone out, and there'll be some results here. There's been a public meeting that we had attendees at, and all that information is now feeding into the board as they start to consider items for next year's budget. We are looking at some of the next year's items such as salaries, benefits, utilities, inflation. I want to talk a little bit about those as we move along around, as well as interest revenues, rental fees, international student fees, where the funding is going to come from. So this budget has to be prepared and adopted by bylaw by June 30th, 2025, but we know for our own purposes that that's really the first week of May, so that we can move into staffing. Now, student enrollment is the driver for funding, and this is the slide I wanted to show you around the grade by grade. Why did enrollment drop year over year? Again, looking at a relatively small K number, And that is consistent with the birth rate in 2020 being lower than the birth rate in 2019. So just a slight reduction. So 2019's births arrived in kindergarten this year, and we move forward to grade 1. And when you look at grade 11 and 12, and those look like two larger cohorts, they aren't really. Those are some students that are on the 6-year plan that are also, they're here for more than 1 year in grade 12 or grade 11, or it's blended. So that's where we get the 6-year graduation rate. So they're not really going to lose that giant grade 12 cohort out. But really where the issue is those K numbers coming in. So you can see the bubble is sitting around grade 6s and 7. And that's going to be moving into the secondary schools in the next 2 years. And then if the kindergarten rates don't recover significantly, you're going to see that the elementary schools are going to see a overall drop in enrollment, unless we get significant in-migration. So I already mentioned that we're looking at dropping 136 FTE for next year and then seeing more stabilization. You've seen this slide. I just went over that one. And we also have a significant number of grade 12s, again, worked with Inclusive Education and Associate Superintendent Darlene Ramsey. Sorry, not Darlene Ramsey, Darlene Reynolds.
Oh my gosh, you guys, that's so silly.
You don't know that goes back to 2002. I'm sorry. Darlene Reynolds. And we see a stabilization. There's only 2 of us in this room that know what that means. Stabilization. I'm really sorry. Stabilization of quite embarrassed, of our level 1, 2s, and 3s as we move out into the next couple of years, but it is a drop for next year based on the grade 12s going out and the number of Ks that have been identified. Moving down to expenditures, we've had 3 years of significant wage increases, 4%, 6.75, and 3 is this year. And we're anticipating that those will continue to be funded by government, just what's happened to date. But we have had experiences in the past where that has not been the case. There have been some years where government's been in a difficult situation where we haven't had the board hasn't had full funding for wage increases that were funded in the previous year or previous cycle. I'm not suggesting I have any information on that. I'm just saying that remains a risk factor as the economy shifts, and we know that this budget is based on economic uncertainty. There has been no indication of what any wage increases will be for next year. I understand that teacher bargaining is currently underway at the provincial table. It was supposed to be finished in February, and keeping will begin shortly, as you representing also the USW, and we don't know what wage increases might look like moving into the next year. So the ministry will likely, in budget instructions, to instruct boards not to budget for any increases because they're typically funded. We'll wait and see what that comes as, but we will start our work without any increases on wages because we just don't know. What we also don't know is, because those increases were so big, principals, vice principals, and exempt staff were funded by government for the 4%, 6.75%, and 3%. But previous to that, any increase was paid for by the board. Could we be returning to that timeline, that time again? Possibly. We don't know. But we do, again, that's a risk factor as we head into this budget, that any increases that teachers and the other unionized staff, support staff negotiate is often matched by the board matches the principals and vice principals to those. We don't know.
Coming through the chair. So is that correlated to the government in power at the time, or has that also been seen with the current government?
The not funding the exempt staff?
Yeah.
With the current government.
The current government, okay. Sometimes if there's a ideological...
When increases are smaller, they have left it to boards to manage without providing funding into the system for principals and vice principals. And past boards would know that. The current board would have had funding throughout their time, but past boards would understand that they're not always funded. We still have sort of the post-pandemic absenteeism levels that have exceeded sort of pre-pandemic levels. We know there's been a significant cultural shift around staying at home when you're sick. And I'm not making judgment on that. That's the reality is it costs more money for people to stay home when they're sick. And we have the impacts of that continuing on our budget. And we'll see another increase on Canada Pension Plan premiums as the upper limit moves from 71.3 to 81.2, so there's an additional 4% on the higher income earners in the school district to pay a higher CPP premium. It's called second tier. We still have 90% of the board's operating expenditures related to salary and benefits, 10% to services and supplies. And we know that inflation has not been funded on any of the services and supplies, and really the benefits have not been funded either by government, those increases. They've been pretty good about matching the wages, but not the corresponding bargain benefits. So what we see here on the preliminary reports, and this is really important for probably the most important part of this document, is a very significant increase in extended health and dental rates for next year. So teachers are pooled provincially. So everybody in all school districts in the province are going to see a 14.37% increase in dental and health for teachers. That for this board is going to be about $407,000. Over that 1.5 million that I showed you, we were up from in this year's budget over the previous year. QP, that is local experience, so that is up by 18.09%, the cost of benefits. That'll be a $262,000 increase. USW in the preliminary is up 32%, and that's going to be a $154,000 increase. And then PVP and exempt, that again is another provincial one, 11.42%, costing $33,000. So that's close to $900,000 of budget pressure that we don't expect to receive any additional funding for. So it's a good thing the board has a good surplus reserve because this will be challenging. Inflation rates seem to have stabilized around 2%, so we'll be looking at those as we build our supply rates at that rate. That's come down quite a bit from the last couple of years, and we think that's a more of a typical inflationary rate. Not a lot to say around capital. Wouldn't be expecting the board to be receiving any new schools anytime soon. But I just want to highlight, just for this report, that there are growth in some areas of the school district. Maple Bay being one that could create some future challenges that we'll need to look at ways to mitigate in that community. We also are still in the final years of the multi-year upgrade of the finance, procurement, and human resources and payroll software. That should be wrapped up, I think, nearing the end of this school year, the one coming up, 25-26. And we have year 4 of the 5-year custodial equipment replacement plan and year 3 of the 3-year operations equipment plan. So those are still rolling forward as previous commitments of the board. Sorry, you have a question?
Yeah, just sort of a comment just on the capital. I still bump into people who don't or sometimes not everybody sort of gets that capital dollars have to live in capital and never get spent anywhere else. So I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up so people are aware.
Yeah, a board can move money from their operating fund into capital, but you can't take money from capital and move it into operating. So if the board were to, the board have previously disposed of Yount and Crofton, those funds from those dispositions could never have been used to offset operating expenses. But you could move things that were capital in nature from operating and pay for them out of the capital fund. So it's a bit of a shell game, but they definitely can't move money back towards operating to offset operating costs, like pay for additional teachers and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So there really aren't a lot of savings anticipated in the next budget other than the one-time funding of $75,000 to support the move of students. from Cowichan Secondary to Coetson. Certainly the board have put in a lot of items over the last number of years that could be considered. But the one that we do know was a one-timer for sure that we'll take out was the uniform fee allotment. Not a lot else to say around our grants. Those would be approximately 90% is related to student FTE. So I'm currently calculating what the 136 student drop will look like for next year. And I have a pretty good estimate of that right now. International student program is continuing to do well, and it's growing a little bit year over year now. But investment revenues, we do anticipate having to make some adjustments down due to the Bank of Canada rate. We won't see an $800,000 line item there next year. It'll be reduced from that. We'll make some estimates around it. And so we've already talked about surplus. There's 3.9 left from the previous year, and we're currently predicting from the previous board meeting $772,000 off the 24-25 budget in surplus. So to date, there has been the budget guiding principles have been adopted. There's been a budget survey that's gone out and come back, and there's been a series of meetings with the partner groups as well as a public budget meeting where feedback was received on priorities. And so the next steps, got the wrong date here. The board will meet in April to review the funding announcement and first budget position. That shouldn't say March. But the funding is expected on March 15th, 2025. And then the board, as I've mentioned, has to make sure they have their budget into the ministry by June 30th, of which it really needs to be done by May 6th. So, in conclusion, the big story is September over September, anticipating dropping 136 FTE, and we will decrease, make corresponding staffing and supply expenditure reductions to that right at the start. That all impacts the memorandum agreement on class size and composition. Fewer students may mean fewer classes out of that fund. Currently this year that's 72 teachers and 6 EAs. And then I would say that the board are beginning the 25-26 in a sound financial position. I believe if we were to survey our neighbors, most wouldn't have a surplus in excess of 3%. It's a good starting point. So that's the preview for next year.
So looking at the 2.9 that we used last year, sorry. Okay. Through the chair to Secretary Treasurer. So the 2.9 that we spent last year to balance the budget and the pressures of benefits, we're looking at almost all the surplus that we have remaining, give or take $500,000 left over if we remain the same.
Close. The 2.9 million has about $600,000 worth of staffing that wasn't able to be brought back in because the 149 FTE, most of the secondary schools had already allocated their staffing, and that is where a big portion of that swing was. So really, there's about 700,000. It would be we would have been at 2.2 had we been on target or been able to recover those. Not 2.5 where we started. We would actually have been further along, in a better position. So those will come right off the top. And be reduced off the budget as we start.
It's a serious budget this year.
It's a very serious budget. Mm-hmm.
Trustee Souza.
Great. Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you once again, Secretary Treasurer, and your team for an ongoing excellent job in putting this work together and balancing things out. We spoke briefly in the gym during the opening of Cowichan Secondary around graduation ceremonies, and given how much it costs to put on graduation ceremonies in the arena, and whether there's any feasibility of moving the ceremonies, if not for this year, for next year, to the gym as well, rather than renting out the arena again, because as I understand it, it's significant. So I'm just curious about that, whether that could be feasible, if not for this year, for next year, to sort of look at the ability to do that, logistically, financially, like various elements of it. Whereas before, the arena was rented because, of course, not everyone could fit into the old school. But I'm wondering about that piece with the new gym and capacity there.
I think that'll be for the school to, I think determine. Those fees don't come out of the board's operating funds. They would come from student collections or grad fees.
Oh, okay.
Certainly, that's a school-based item for that school to consider.
Okay, so it's at that level. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Croft.
Last time I was at a grad for Cowichan Secondary, there were 4,000 people in the audience. So although you're graduating a few hundred kids, they seem to bring a lot of friends and family. So I'm not sure that number would fit in the gym.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, I'm going to move on to the budget survey. So trustees, in your package, and we'll email this to Trustee Souza and Trustee Strachan. I'm going to share the high-level summary, but trustees have a detailed summary with all of the comments from the public. So a survey went out. There were 63 respondents, so it's not the best response that we've ever had on a budget survey. You can see from here that 65% of the respondents were parents, and we had only 6.35% for students, and we did promote it with DSAC and hope that they would have more respond, but only 4 students responded. So that is how the feedback came in, and you can see it there on the screen. So we asked questions around priorities, and I'll just go right to the data. So the first category was on the strategic plan 2025-2030 learning priority. And the number one response was in regards to prioritizing resources for learners with disabilities and diverse abilities. So that seems to trend with prior years. The second response was to target literacy skills. So those are areas of priority. There was good feedback on all of those as important. The next category is around Indigenous ways of knowing. And here we saw the greatest number of responses around experiential, hands-on, and land-based opportunities for students to participate in local traditional cultural experiences and teaching from elders and in community. The second highest level of response was just ensuring that every learner feels safe at schools and can learn in a way that is true to their own history and culture. The third category was around individual and collective well-being. Here we saw the number one response around continuing to support food programs for students. At this point, our number of responses dropped off a bit on this question. The second area would be to continue to promote safe and inclusive learning environments for diverse communities. So that's kind of an overlap of one up above. And then on the final category, that is around caring for place. The number one response was to work on relationship with the local natural world through teachings based in local Indigenous knowledge and culture. Now behind all of this, there was the opportunity for the public to provide written comments, and the board have those in their packages. But these were the feedback that came through the survey. And I'll stop sharing and see if there's any questions, or if that just sort of stands on its own as explanatory.
Is there a question?
Trustee Souza.
Great, thank you. I'm just curious, and I know you may not have the numbers ready at hand, but I'm curious as to the response rates this year compared to last year and the previous, or at least last year.
95 last year, and I believe the year before was closer to 130.
Okay, so there's a steady decline then over the last 3 years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Lisa.
Just wondering if it's because things have been really stable for the last for the last couple of years, there haven't been a lot of big swings or big changes, and I wonder if the public is well aware, or parents are well aware of that.
Trustee Schmidt.
I know that social media was going crazy that the budget survey was out there. So the fact that it wasn't filled out, sometimes we found in my experience in a few few rolls around the clock here with the boards, the less surveys we had was in our better times, when things were easy and going well, and the most surveys were when things were not going well financially. So I wonder if we're just starting. We're probably kind of plateauing a little bit. We're dropping a little bit, but it's nothing major. But I'm wondering if once we get into some harder budgets, that's when we'll start seeing that budget survey lift up again as far as numbers.
Any other comments?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My experience is kind of, and this is why maybe one of these days we'll get a look. Maybe we should ask Jason for the list of how many people responded to what and when. But the first time we did a really big survey, I thought was with preparing the strategic plan. That was one of the biggest surveys we got back and one of the earliest ones we did. But I think they've been falling off consistently. And I think part of it was the novelty of being asked, because we only recently started doing surveys to the degree that media, that the internet allowed us. And I agree with you that it could be, to me it's 50-50. It could be that everybody's going, oh well, it's X number of dollars, same thing as last year. But it could be, do they feel they're being heard? Because why would you fill out a survey if you're not being heard? So I think we have to consider both those things, and before we consider them, really have a good look at the stats for the surveys over the past few years.
Trustee Schmidt.
I wonder if we can make a suggestion, because to be honest, the adults are not the people that I'm interested in the surveys from. I'm more interested in getting surveys from the kids. Where we're at, where we're going, what do they want to focus more on? What do they need us to budget more on? Because sometimes we'll see veins of groups running through our surveys pushing what they want. And if we listen more to the public outside this, sometimes what I see is that people are not overly educated on what we actually are doing. And in reading this document, I see that again. I see that people actually don't really understand what we are actually doing. And I think that's the danger of the public survey, is so many people don't understand what we're actually doing, or are so invested in their own school that they don't see what's happening at other sites. So they're driven by only what they think by what's happening at their school. And that sometimes is where the waters get muddied. And I think that if anything, if we could look at more at like our senior kids and push our survey harder through our kids, this is their budget. This is our strategic priorities based on what their needs are. And if we look at more, if we push it further out to the general public that doesn't actually even have the knowledge of what we're doing, because they're not focused on what that is, and that's where we start saying, well, we're going to listen to you, then we might be listening to the wrong voices. And so what I would worry about is how far we push this out versus what are the important voices we want to hear from, I guess.
One of the things that I've learned through my journey before as a trustee and as a trustee, the public is a little bit at ease when things are going smoothly here. And it's at ease when there's not specific interest groups trying to get their own way with the school district or stir things up or want to make a statement for their own personal gratification. When that's not happening, the public is very much at ease when things are going smoothly. So that could be part of it too. I agree with you. Kids' voices are where we learn a lot from, so we should definitely look at that. Trustee Croft.
I agree with everything you said. I was just concerned that I wanted to share. I was not recommending pushing anything more out to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not where I was going at all.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, well, I only have 2 more items. Next is the 25-26 public consultation meeting feedback. It's included in your package. The attendees came and we didn't really get the feedback on the forms that we had present, but the board did receive feedback through the questions that were asked and the types of questions that were asked. So those questions are listed here. It was around, could we create a dual track program of choice for a school of choice within a school? How does the Ministry of Education and Childcare hear from parents to hear their concerns? What was $100,000 for assessments that is included in the presentation used for? What does the 18.94%, which came out of a slide, funding for inclusive education include? Who are the partner groups who have been consulted on the budget? How will the funds be used to improve Indigenous graduation rates, referring to another $100,000 that was put in by the board in this year's budget? And what can parents do to support their kids getting assessments and possibly funding for supports? So we had our assistant superintendents present, as well as members of the board who all took turns in answering those questions, and those answers are included here. That's for information. It's part of the feedback for the board.
Thank you.
And then the final one is just really a address notification. This is business. This will change the addresses optionally of a number of the schools that are located in North Cowichan. So as of, I think the date on here is March 17th, yes. North Cowichan will be can be the city of choice on the addresses, which could require some updates of our website, as well as other school printed materials. So it's a for information item. And for the chair, that concludes my report.
Trustee Gilman?
Yes.
So those costs, I'm assuming, would just be slowly integrated over time as new resources are needed. And
I would think, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's it? Any other business?
Advisory.
Sorry?
5 minutes of advisory?
We didn't have advisory this month.
Sorry, that's right.
So there you go, motion to adjourn. Trustee Schmidt, Trustee Lise, all in favor. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.